what really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Friday, June 8th, 2018. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today, and the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, handling the phones, putting on the air with your comments and questions. And, of course, this being Friday, the lovely Lady Claire will be joining us for hour number 3 of the show. We've got a chair already set up here and headphones ready to go. So let's get right on into it. Today is the anniversary of Israel's attack on the USS Liberty, and it is one of the most egregious acts that Israel carried out, basically trying to steamroller the United States into war against Egypt on Israel's behalf. And this all took place on June 8th, 1967. It was the 4th day of the Arab-Israeli 6-day war. And basically, Israel launched an attack against the ship by jamming the USS Liberty's radios on the frequencies known to be used by the American Navy. And then they went on in with these unmarked aircraft and just shot the heck out of the ship, killed 34 American sailors, wounded many others, including Captain McGonigal. Then the Liberty refused to sink. The crew were basically ditching all of their intelligence gear over the side to basically destroy it, because it was an intelligence gathering ship, radio intercept antennas all over the place. Then Israel came on out with some small attack boats. These were marked as being Israeli. And they continued to shoot up the USS Liberty, and they launched torpedoes, one of which hit amidships. And the attack just lasted 2 hours. And finally, the USS Liberty was able to get a radio message out saying, "We are under attack by Israel." And it was a good thing they did, because when Israel started attacking the USS Liberty, they told the US government that the Liberty was being attacked by Egypt. And there was actually a strike in the air on the way to Cairo in response to this. But that strike was recalled as soon as the word got out that it was actually Israel attacking the ship. And at that point, everybody went into cover-up mode. And Israel came on out and said it was a case of mistaken identity. The weather was really terrible. Our pilots have got horrible eyesight. We thought the USS Liberty was this Egyptian horse carrier, because, of course, we all know that horse carrier ships have dish antennas all over them. And that was the official story. And it was backed up by the U.S. government. It was a case of mistaken identity. Well, that really is rather absurd. Because if you go over to the National Cryptographic Museum, they have the flag of the USS Liberty on display there. And it's full of cannon holes from the Israeli attack. So somebody with their hand on that trigger knew they were shooting an American flag. Now, it's subsequently come on out that, in point of fact, the Israeli pilots did try and communicate with their commander saying, this is an American ship we've been told to an attack, and they were again given the order, sink it. So this was no accident, it was deliberate, and it was covered up. It was covered up. And one of the Navy attorneys who helped lead the official investigation of Israel's attack on the USS Liberty basically came forward afterwards and said that the commission was ordered to conclude it was an accident and mistaken identity by President Lyndon Johnson and his Defense Secretary Robert McNamara. And this was retired Captain Ward Boston, and he held a news conference and said Johnson and McNamara told those heading the Navy's inquiry to conclude the attack was a case of mistaken identity, despite the overwhelming evidence to the contrary. It was a massive, massive cover-up. And Johnson and McNamara basically protected Israel. Because can you think of any other nation that could just haul off and have an unprovoked attack on a U.S. warship, kill 34 of our sailors, tear up the ship itself, wound hundreds, and not get attacked the following day. In fact, the next year, U.S. military aid to Israel was increased. And it's another reminder that our government is firmly under the control of a foreign power, and we should not be accepting of it. Now, forgive me while I hydrate there. WhatReallyHappened.com and this radio show, we're not normally an entertainment show, but I feel this is worth mentioning. Anthony Bourdain, who is this very famous expert on food and culture around the world. He used to have a show on Travel Channel. More recently, he was on CNN as their traveling chef. Has reportedly committed suicide. He was 61 years old. And my brother actually met him in the course of business. Apparently, Bourdain did struggle with both heroin and crack cocaine addiction. But interestingly enough, not too long ago, Bourdain had come on out publicly blasting the corporate media for what he described as their twisted and shallow depiction of Palestinians. And so he was out there very vocally saying the Palestinians are not being fairly treated by the corporate media. But anyway, it's reported that he committed suicide. No other details have been provided at this point. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Getting into the war zone areas, Benjamin Netanyahu is warning that Israel will destroy Syria if Iran does not withdraw. Now, at this point, Netanyahu is looking for an excuse to go to war because the only Iranians actually in Syria are military advisors. Israel's been screaming there are Iranian troops all over Syria getting ready to invade Israel. No, that's not true. It's another Israeli lie. Because that's how Israel works. If at first you don't succeed, lie, lie again. But Netanyahu is out there pounding the war drums and saying, we're going to destroy all of Syria if Iran does not withdraw. Just trying to throw his weight around. And I don't think either Syria or Iran are going to take him that seriously, even though Israel does have nuclear weapons. Because they understand the instant Israel actually uses the nuclear weapons, the political costs to Israel are going to be quite high. For one thing, every single American is going to realize that our own government has been lying to us all this time about Israel not having nuclear weapons. And every single American is going to realize that every single penny of money taken from the American people, pardon me, and sent to Israel is illegal under U.S. law. The Symington Amendment to the Foreign Appropriations Act, the Glenn Act is another one out there who the name eludes me at the moment. And the American people are going to want a refund. Because the American people have been forced to shell out something like 10 times the entire cost of the Apollo moon project to Israel. And all we get back is another handout for more. We haven't even got an updated version of Velcro out of all that investment. So Israel's in a bit of a spot. If they actually use their nuclear weapons, it's going to just absolutely collapse support for Israel in many countries, not just the United States, for having nuclear weapons and refusing to join the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and refusing IAEA inspections, all the while screaming about how Iran is the bad guy and Iraq's the bad guy and they've got nuclear weapons and they're going to have nuclear weapons and you've got to go make war on them for us. Plus, use of a nuclear weapon might trigger a massive attack on Israel by multiple nations to just get on in there before Israel can use a nuclear weapon again. Besides, Israel doesn't want to fight their own wars. They never have. They want the United States to fight the wars for them. They want the U.S. to go in and destroy Syria. They're just going to manufacture the excuse. Netanyahu's out there saying, see, we're your friends. We'll gin up an excuse where you can go back into Syria and finish up this war the way you want. Over in Turkey, Erdogan is vowing to militarily attack Iraq if the Iraq government refuses to clear out the Kurdish militants. And basically said this on an interview with CNN just yesterday. And Kandil, Sinjar, and Makmur would be targeted by Turkish forces should Baghdad not clean them out of the Kurds. Now, apparently, the latest polls in Turkey are showing that Erdogan is unlikely to win a first-round victory in Turkey's upcoming elections. And Erdogan's AKP party is projected to lose its majority in parliament when Turks go to vote on June 24th. Now, in April, Erdogan called for snap elections in order to expand the authority of the Turkish executive branch. It looks like that is going to backflash on him rather badly. Britain is out there screaming that it's time to create a rapid response unit to deal with Russian aggression. And Moscow, of course, well, the Russian embassy is saying, this is kind of ridiculous. We haven't aggressed against anybody. If you want to form a rapid response unit to deal with aggression, point it at the Americans and the Israelis. But anybody with eyes can see who the aggressor is in this current era of war. And it's not Russia, and it's not Iran, and it's not North Korea. It wasn't Iraq. It isn't Iran. It's the United States. Country after country after country after country. 7 officially acknowledged wars underway right now, along with who knows how many covert interventions. We know who the bad guy is this time out. Now, the IAEA has confirmed that Iran is still fully compliant with their commitments under the P5+1 agreement despite the U.S. exit. And the remaining members of that treaty are still committed to maintaining that agreement. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Chris in Las Vegas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Chris, are you there? I guess we lost Chris. All right, well, maybe he'll call back in. Now, Iran has basically gone out there and reminded everybody publicly that it is Israel and their nuclear weapons that are the threat to the world, the threat to peace. And they're absolutely right. I mean, Israel has this history of constant belligerence and aggression to its neighbors. Iran has not initiated a war of conquest in 200 years. It's not their nature to do that. They just want to live their lives and be left alone and take care of their country, take care of their family. They're not out there just, screaming about, getting rid of the other people. That's Israel's job. And again, there is this wonderful documentary made by an Israeli filmmaker called Don't Tell Mother I'm in Iran. And it just shows ordinary, everyday life in Iran. And shock of shocks, they're people just like us. They have families, they have businesses, they like their cars. That's it. They're not raving fanatics like the media would have that. Okay, let me see. Okay, now, everybody's wondering now what will be the next nation for the U.S. to invade. And I think the answer is pretty obvious at this point. Last week, Iran switched from the dollar to the euro for their international trade, banking, and sales of oil. And sure enough, we're already seeing the U.S. military-industrial complex, the corporate media, and Israel all getting together to say, oh my goodness, Iran was lying about their nuclear weapons development. They've been building them all along. They violated the P5+1. And we've seen this pattern before. Iraq in 2002 got permission to sell Iraq's oil, or Saddam got permission from the United Nations to sell Iraq's oil for the euro instead of the dollar. 1 year later, Saddam has nuclear weapons. We've got to go on in and give him what for. And bomb his country into rubble, lynch him, and put Iraq's oil back on the world market only for the US dollar. They did, okay. Then we saw a repeat over in Libya, where Gaddafi shut down their private central bank and established a state central bank and a new value-based currency, the gold dinar. And then he announced that anybody who wanted to buy Libya's oil had to pay for it in the gold dinar. And a lot of the African nations were saying they wanted to use the gold dinar for their cross-border trade and banking because it was obviously much more reliable than the fiat currencies, like the US dollar. So, oh my goodness, Gaddafi is evil, Gaddafi is this, Gaddafi is that. Go on in, kill Gaddafi. The gold for the gold dinar has vanished, and Libya's oil is back on the world market for the US dollar. We've seen this pattern before. Iran is going to be invaded, and it's not because they're building nuclear weapons, and it's not because they're evil people. It's because they refuse to bow down before the global hegemonic domination of the United States Federal Reserve note. That's what's driving so many of these wars. Because right now, forcing the rest of the world to use the US dollar and charging interest on it is about the only thing still holding Wall Street and the Federal Reserve up. We've lost a huge amount of our manufacturing. Nobody wants our GMO agriculture. Basically, the United States wants to become the loan shark to the world. It's really what it comes on down to. Over in Taiwan, the United States has spent $250 million upgrading the so-called American Institute, which functions basically as an American embassy in Taipei, Taiwan. China is very much put out about this, and even more so because the new building is to be reopened, rededicated on June 12th, the same day as the summit between President Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. So somebody is sending some kind of a message somewhere. You know what's really frustrating about reading all this news? You know something is coming. There's going to be one mistake, one misstep, one bad move, and the shooting's going to begin. And it just gets really hard sitting there waiting for it to happen. Because you know it's coming, you know you can't stop it. And you just start saying, you know, I'm almost tired of waiting. Over in Gaza, the protests at the security fence, the prison cage, are continuing. More Gazans are being shot. And the Gazans' latest form of protest is they're dressing up like concentration camp prisoners. Now that's going to make for some interesting photos and videos along that fence when those pictures go global on the independent media. So, and of course, Israel's going to scream trademark infringement because we're the only prisoners who've ever been in concentration camps, or some such nonsense as that. All right, we are coming up on a commercial break here, and I'm going to check in with our control room and see what's going on with this missing caller, and we'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go ahead and grab a phone call. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
A couple of things. One is I really don't think. Well, I can't say Trump isn't stupid enough. He might be, but I kind of doubt that the entire government, that the going to try to invade Iran now. First of all, even if Russia doesn't get involved, and there's a good chance they would, that would be World War III right there. But even if that doesn't happen, they've got to realize it would take, you will not be able to do it with the military we have today. They will not get the amount of volunteers. Remember, the people who are subject, who would join the military today are the millennials and the Generation Z.
Yes.
They don't get their news. They don't get their news from the mainstream media. They get their news from the independent media.
Yeah.
They go on various parts of internet. They listen to shows like yours. They listen to InfoWars. They listen to numerous other shows. Blackstone Intelligence. I don't know if they've heard of them. Very good. There's tons of stuff out there. Okay, they're not going to Orbit Report. You probably heard of them. You know, that's where most of millennials get their news from.
Yes.
They're not going to Army now. They're not going to join the military. It's not like after 9/11 when they watched the idea that 19 Arabs attacked, brought down the World Trade Center, including Building 7, which wasn't even hit, and of course the Pentagon. They're not going to buy this stuff this time.
No, they aren't. No, they aren't. And it's not just the fact that they're ignoring the corporate media. We now have a significant population of veterans who fought in these wars over the last 18 years who are going to be telling these younger kids, no, this is not a good idea. These wars are not moral. They're not glorious. They're not heroic. It's all about capturing other people's property.
One of those veterans would be Angelo John Gage. I don't know if you ever heard of him. He's got a number of things on YouTube.
Yeah.
Very outspoken. He really attacked Trump after the first Libyan bombing, and he was a big Trump supporter before. But he's anti-war. He doesn't, and so are so many veterans.
Yes.
The thing is this: they have to have a draft. But once you try initiating a draft now, you think the '60s, were turbulent.
Yep.
I think this nation would be torn apart if you tried to draft now. I believe there will be some kind of a civil war, insurrection, whatever you want to call it. It won't be peaceful. It won't be nice. And I think the actual military, people are in the military today, most of them don't want part of this either. They don't want to give up their lives for nothing. For what? Because Netanyahu doesn't like Iran, or the oil companies want the oil wells of Libya. Genie Oil, for instance.
Yes.
They know that most of these troops know the deal. It's not going to be pretty. And I don't know if Trump realizes this or whether the people around him, I don't think a bum like Bolton cares, nor does Pompeo, but there's got to be people within including, by the way, within the military, high-ranking military officers that understand this. It's not going to wash. And if Israel, by the way, I think Russia should make it clear right now to Israel, you attack Syria, you're at war with Russia, period. We're not going to allow you to attack them. You bomb them with nukes, we'll nuke you. All it takes is one nuke, and that's it. Okay? If you dare to do more, I don't think they would bomb. I don't think they'd use nukes. Syria. I think they're capable of using it in Iran, but because Iran probably would beat them in a one-on-one match conventionally. But I don't think they're going to do that to Syria. But I think Putin should make it clear to them, you do, you're done. Finished.
Well, I would like to see Putin step on in, but on the other hand, Putin is trying to keep this from escalating. And, he's basically helping to get Hezbollah out of the border area to take that excuse away from Israel. He's basically saying Syrians only in the southern part of Syria. Putin is trying to basically take away all the excuses for escalation. And Netanyahu's just trying to come up with new ones. And the latest one is, the Iranians have got to leave. And we're talking about a handful of people. But Israel's propaganda has been, Syria is just swarming with Iranian troops and they're getting ready to invade Israel. No proof, of course. Same as it's always been. You will believe what we tell you to believe. But at some point, I think Russia needs to upgrade Syria's ability to deal with Israel's attacks. And I don't know what led Putin to back off giving Syria the S-400. It was very obvious that his meeting with Netanyahu was rancorous in the extreme. But
yeah, he didn't give him those S-400. I personally, if you notice, the Israelis attacked Syrians now. They're not attacking them. They're not sending the planes directly into Syria anymore. They're going into Lebanon, which of course is violating Lebanese airspace.
Yep.
And there's an active war there, and launching those missiles from Lebanon.
Yes.
They're afraid to go in with their planes because they figure they're going to be shot down. Okay, this is not. This is a very tough Syrian army today. They've been toughened up by all these years of war, and they're not just going to be pushovers anymore. And,
no, they aren't. No, they aren't. Okay, Mark, we got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and we'll be back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go right back to the phones here. Pete in Florida. Aloha, Pete. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Happy Friday, Mike. Before I get to my question about the USS Liberty, I want to hit on a couple points that Mark made, if I may. I was a former submarine sailor. I joined in 1990, and I joined under probably what a lot of kids at that day and age, and probably a lot more since then. And before then, obviously, were led to believe, and that is that, we were fighting for the defense of our country and so forth. And I think to Mark's point about a draft, now that I'm jaded and older, I am definitely against the idea of a draft. I'm actually against the idea of people maybe even just joining, to be patriotic, because it's so untrue about joining to be patriotic. Obviously, we're fighting unlawful wars and such.
Well,
But,
it goes back to what Smedley Butler said. War is just a racket.
Right. But, that's a lot to swallow. For such a simple, it's such a huge comment, for such a simple sentence, that's a lot for people to take,
Yeah.
Money we spent, they're thinking it's got to be something more than that. Obviously, our politicians can't be lying to us that badly. But
yeah, they are. They are. They are. And you know what? Americans don't think about this a lot, but if those corporations that make money off of the wars were required to actually pay the cost of the wars, they'd go out of business. And so the way it's set up is we, the American people, pay for it all, and the corporations get the profits. That's how twisted this whole system is.
Sure. That's exactly what happened with the bailouts, right?
Yep.
They privatize the gains and socialize the losses.
Yep. And that's fascism.
Yep, exactly. So getting back to the USS Liberty, I know you know this, and I'll leave you with this. Can you share with us this controversy about John McCain and his dad's affiliation with that cover-up?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. John McCain's father, the admiral, pardon me, basically came on in, and as far as the ship and its crew were concerned, he laid down the law. You will not talk about this at all, or you will go to jail or possibly worse.
That's all. I thought there was more to. There probably is, but I don't know. I just think there's just the cover-ups that are going on. That's the one thing. The one thing I hope, the lasting impression I'll have of Trump is if he actually holds true and starts throwing people in jail for some of these other improprieties that are going on.
Well, I've given up. I've given up on Trump actually doing anything. It looks like after all of this smoke and mirrors, they're going to fry some lower level officials and offer them up as a living sacrifice. But the real perpetrators, the masterminds, are going to get away again, unfortunately. The only thing that might happen is when this nation collapses, in the aftermath, there might be a push for some kind of a citizens tribunal that will go out and grab these people and expose their crimes for the history books, and strip them of their wealth and throw them out in the streets again. Because nothing punishes a money junkie worse than having to give up their money.
Oh, I agree. I think they all should be impoverished. I mean, that's the one thing to do is hit them where it hurts.
Yep.
And I would sign up for a draft. I mean, I would be happy to be drafted to be a part of that group, you know?
Yep. It would be interesting.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot. And we're going to let you go and switch over to Laura in Michigan. Aloha, Laura. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I was just going to talk about the Liberty.
Yes.
I want to tell everybody they can order the book about the cover-up, erasingtheliberty.com,
Yes.
and find out how it was covered up. The most decorated ship. My husband is in the book. His ship was in Malta, anchored in Malta, when the Liberty was attacked. So anyway, when they found out about the Liberty, they left out of port so fast, they left people still on shore. And they tried to make their way to the Liberty, and they almost got there, and they were called off.
Yes.
Here, their ship had medical personnel, had equipment to help the ship, and they got called off from helping.
Yep. Not just that ship, but the
Yellowstone.
one of the carriers in the area launched a force to basically provide air cover over the remains of the Liberty to guard against another air attack from Israel. And amazingly enough, a lot of people don't know this, there was actually a Soviet Navy destroyer that came up to the Liberty and said, "We are here to guard you until you can get to safety." And so there was a lot of protection there. There was also supposedly a U.S. submarine that had been watching the whole thing. But McNamara got on the radio and he ordered these missions to be recalled. They literally intended to leave the Liberty out there without any protection. If they hadn't had that Soviet destroyer, Israel might have come on back and tried to finish them off. Because even though they'd failed with this attempt to frame Egypt for the sinking, all of those still living Liberty sailors represented a potential embarrassment for the government of Israel. They didn't want them to survive to be able to tell the story. They wanted them all at the bottom of the ocean. Even Lyndon Johnson expressed to McNamara that he would rather see the entire crew of the Liberty on the bottom of the ocean rather than embarrass our good friend Israel.
So, yeah, it was Saratoga that had the air that sent out the airlines, you know,
Yes.
to save the ship. It
Yep.
was Saratoga. The
They
Madison
actually-
ship was Yellowstone.
They
It was a
actually did it
tender.
twice. They sent a flight. McNamara called it back. Then they said, "No, we can't sit idly by while this is going on." And they sent a second flight. And that time, Johnson got on the phone and ordered the recall of the strike force.
And the second thing is, besides Israel being rats,
Yep.
you know, the cover-up. How, you know, nobody even mentions it today. Even today, nobody mentions it. You don't see Donald Trump saying anything about the most decorated Navy ship since World War II. Nothing.
Yeah, they were the most decorated Navy ship. Captain McGonigal won the Congressional Medal of Honor. And shamefully, he was not awarded it by the president or at the White House, which is the normal tradition. When you get a Congressional Medal of Honor, you get to go to the White House, and the president personally decorates you. In the case of Captain McGonigal, he was given his award at the Navy Yard behind closed gates. No public, no press were allowed. That's where he got his medal. That's where he got his CMH.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to remind everybody they can order the book at erasingtheliberty.com.
Yes.
It will help. The money will go to help make the movie, which will be really important to get that movie out so people find out exactly what happened.
Well, it is a good book. I have a copy of it myself, and the story does need to get out. We cannot survive as a nation when we are lied to on such a scale by our own government. We just really can't. Laura, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go.
Thank you.
The phone lines are now clear if you want to call on in. Getting on back to Israel and Gaza, Netanyahu is touring Europe right now on a charm offensive, trying to convince the leaders of other countries why Israel is really the good guy in the Bloody Monday massacre. And he's out there saying, well, really, we showed tremendous restraint because Hamas wants us to kill lots and lots of the people of Gaza because it does look so bad. But we've held back, and we've only killed this many. We could have easily killed a lot more. So, see, we're the good guys here. And he's not getting a very good reception. I think Netanyahu has crossed the shark in the eyes of the world. We understand what's going on. And Netanyahu is just too used to this idea of being able to come up with whatever ridiculous comment crosses his mind, like nuclear ducks, and he won't be challenged on it. But like I said, I think that Bloody Monday massacre was Israel's version of Amritsar, and it's signaling the beginning of the decline of Israel's control, not over Palestine, but Israel's credibility in the eyes of the rest of the world. And as Israel's credibility sinks, they're going to drag down everybody who's still supporting them, like Nikki Haley. The corporate media is still out there doing what they do, trying to protect Israel, and nothing illustrates that more than the fallout from the Argentinian soccer team's boycott of Israel. And so Argentina's national soccer team is headed for the World Cup in Russia, and one of their strikers is named Gonzalo Higuain, and they were going to have this warm-up game with Israel, and then Argentina canceled it, both because of what happened in Gaza and because Israel started making demands that the match be held in Jerusalem instead of Haifa, to use Argentina to try and sell the image that Jerusalem is now the capital of Israel, even though the United Nations says, no, that's not so. So The Guardian, when reporting this story, quoted Gonzalo as saying they've finally done the right thing, meaning the Venezuelan soccer team boycott. And the BBC reported it exactly the same way. They've finally done the right thing. So going on over to the New York Slimes, they went about it a little bit differently. They ignored Gonzalo's, and they basically tried to write a story saying that the reason the Argentinian soccer team boycotted Israel is they were afraid of Hamas violence. It had nothing to do with the Bloody Monday massacre or anything that Israel had done. The Argentinians were just afraid they would be targeted for violence by Hamas and the Palestinians. I mean, talk about a big steaming pile of USDA choice bovine excrement. That is it right there. And then the New York Slimes wonders why their readership numbers are down. Almost as bad as CNN's. All right, let's take a phone call. Terry in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Terry, are you there?
Liberty. I just wondered.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I hear you now.
You can hear me okay, Mike? Yeah, on the USS Liberty, I'm just wondering how much Johnson and McNamara knew in the beginning before this even happened. Do you think they had any knowledge of it? And I guess, nobody knows, but what's your best guess?
I have to wonder if maybe they did know and maybe they were ready to go to war against Egypt on behalf of Israel. They just needed an excuse, and Israel manufactured one, because Johnson and McNamara seemed to already be in a position to make sure that nobody was coming to the assistance of the USS Liberty.
I know. And when they got attacked in the beginning, and the ship launched the fighters to intercept them, and Johnson recalled those, that's an act of treason right there.
I think it could be considered that, yes.
Because when the U.S. Was attacked by a foreign government, and a serious attack, they became the enemy.
Yes.
And the definition of treason is aiding and abetting, giving the enemy comfort. That's exactly what they did when they recalled those fighters.
Yes,
So,
that's exactly what they did.
Be held accountable, even though they're dead, just to set the record straight. That's what I think.
I agree. I
And,
absolutely agree. And there are a lot of people out there trying to set the record straight. And of course, Israel keeps coming on out and screaming that, oh, they're a bunch of anti-Semites, they're Jew haters. And again, you have to put it in context. Wanting people to remember the attack on the USS Liberty isn't really anti-Semitic any more than remembering Pearl Harbor is anti-Japanese. But that's Israel's card all the time, no matter what they do, no matter what anybody says, oh, you're an anti-Semite, Jew hate, blah, 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 blah. You want Hitler to come on back and gas Jewish babies in the ovens. And remember, Amy Goodman on her show, Democracy Now!, had a former member of the Knesset who admitted on the air, it's just a trick. It's just what Israel does to silence criticism. You're an anti-Semite. You're an anti-Semite.
Well, people are starting to see through that, Mike. It's like crying wolf. You can only do it so much.
Yeah, they burned it out. It's lost its shock value. Nobody cares anymore. Oh, you're an anti-Semite. Okay, fine.
Well, I knew about the Liberty. I was in the military about the time it happened, shortly thereafter. But it's amazing how many people today still never heard of it. Like, I went to, my wife took me to this Bible study, these Christians, there's about 10 of them there. They were in their 60s and 70s. And the leader said, hey, we're going to have this couple just got back from Israel talk about the trip.
Yep.
And they talked about it and all that. And then I said, I guess they wouldn't let you go near Gaza or the West Bank, would they? And she said, yeah, there's places that they said were too dangerous because there's, terrorists out there that we couldn't go to. And but she says we went up north and we heard the bombs going off in Syria. And I said, well, that was Israel attacking Syria. And she says, no, that was Assad bombing his own people. Mentality. And then one guy, he brought up that Liberty. He's the only guy that ever heard of it, the whole of the 10 people. He's the only guy that ever heard of it. And there's one thing about the Liberty. What about those F-4s that had nuclear weapons on them? Is that a true thing, Mike, where, they had nuclear weapons and they might have been heading for Egypt at the time? Have you heard that?
My understanding is there was a strike on the way to Cairo, and I've heard that it may have had nuclear weapons. I haven't been able to confirm that part.
Well, yeah, evidently that breaks it all wide open. They had to know that there was going to be a false flag. They're going to retaliate against the false flag before it even happened.
Yeah, you make a strong case there. Terry, we got to let you go. We got to do a commercial break. We got more callers waiting on the line, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Let's go back to the phones now. Mark in Georgia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, can you hear me okay?
I hear you. It's a little noisy, but I can hear you.
Okay. There was an Israeli pilot that when he first went out there, he saw it was an American ship and he refused to attack. I was wondering if you know his name because, in all fairness, we want to be clear that it's not your typical rank and file Israeli that we're at odds with. It's the people who ordered the attack, the people who knew what they were doing and knew it was an American ship, and they did it anyway.
Yes.
And that's the problem we have, is the criminal element that thinks that they're above the law when they do things like this. Do you happen to know his name?
I don't recall his name, but I do remember the story, and I remember the BBC actually did a documentary about the assault on the Liberty, and they were pretty even-handed. And as part of the show, they had actually obtained audio recordings of the radio traffic between the Israel's attacking aircraft and their controllers to basically confirm that, yeah, the pilots knew they were attacking an American ship, and they were ordered to continue.
Yeah. And so that's like I say, we want to be clear that our quarrel is not with Judaism,
there are Jews of good conscience who know about this, and they speak out against Israel operating with. The thing that people need to understand is impunity brings out the worst in people. When people get away with little things, and they find that they can get away with big things, and it takes otherwise good people, and basically it makes them rot. And
Yes.
that's the thing, spiritually speaking. It causes people to go through a moral decay when they're allowed to get away with doing things that had the roles been reversed, they know it wouldn't have happened. So, but besides that, one other thing I thought in current events, the Geneva Convention, you remember the movie Full Metal Jacket?
Oh, yes.
That's part of the Geneva Convention, saying that the ammunition has to be full metal jacket. Now, hollow points are one thing. I mean, police, I have hollow points in my pistol too. I mean, they're just good for self-defense in terms of mushrooming. But these butterfly rounds that the Zio-Nazis, which, by the way, I use that term to say I'm not talking about you ought to know better Zionists. I mean the people who know that they're doing evil and they don't want their evil exposed or addressed with the moral clarity that there are real Jews saying this is wrong, this is not acceptable, and I don't appreciate or acknowledge these criminals doing this and then saying, oh, your problem is with Jews. No, their problem is they think they're above the law. But these butterfly bullets are in direct, explicit violation of the Geneva Convention, correct?
Correct. We were talking about that the other day.
Yeah. Well, here's something that maybe you hadn't talked about. You know, Alex Jones had this, I'm changing subjects now, and I'll keep this very brief because this is a bit of a joke, that he had a picture of his wife on the beach, and on Facebook I commented, so he traded for a new model. I wonder how long he's going to keep this one. And there were some of his supporters that didn't appreciate that.
Yeah, I can imagine that would be embarrassing here. Okay.
Yeah, well, you can appreciate my but I do have a legitimate point that he did not. Somebody thought he was reconciled with his ex-wife, and it's like, no, this is the next ex-Mrs. Jones. So,
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. Have a blessed day. I'll talk with you later then. Bye.
All right. Thanks a lot, Mark. We got to take a break for station identification. We'll be back with another phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2, and we're going to go right back to the phone lines now. Peter in Los Angeles, thank you for waiting so patiently. What's on your mind today?
Hi, Mike. I've been gone for a little bit, relocated a little bit. But at any rate, listen, Mike, I've been listening to the people calling about the Liberty. And by the way, Admiral Thomas Moore, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, found, along with Dean Rusk, who was the Secretary of State at the time, and numerous other people, have found it to be completely on purpose, planned thing that the Israelis hit the Liberty. The NSA has tapes of the cockpit chatter. The point that the gentleman made just now, where they questioned, oh, that's an American ship, there's an American flag flying. You know what? That's not a good guy. Tons of people during Nuremberg were executed, and their defense was, I was following orders,
Yes.
and they executed them anyway.
Yes.
And that's an illegal order. Just the illegal orders, or if they were even orders, if they're just not spontaneous, horrible, barbarity of shooting that beautiful Palestinian nurse, or withholding medical to that cousin of Tamini who had half his head, blown away by a thing, or all the on and on and on, all the atrocities that they do.
Yes.
That there's, they're all guilty for the just following orders thing. And then there's, I get upset when they talk about the quote, like the good Germans, the good Jews, who really just, they don't know much about it or whatever. Well, you know what? They tolerate all these organizations like the ADL that ruins, a lot of Jews' lives, and just ruins their careers, runs them out of whatever they're doing. All these organizations that shut people up and shout people down, and they tolerate it. Then with their silence, they tolerate it. They tolerate the benefits of it too, that you can't screw them because they can stick the ADL on you as well.
Yes.
So I don't buy any of that stuff, Mike, unless you're actively opposed, and you can count I can count, Gilad Atzmon and Norman Finkelstein and Max Blumenthal and Philip Weiss and you can Yuri Avneri. You can almost count them on two hands. The only people who truly speak out. The rest of the people are compliant, and frankly, they are accessories after the fact. And my criteria, like you've got a caller in here, Mark, who himself was I think he's a sort of a secular Jew, but was born but didn't practice. But he participated voluntarily in the U.S. military, not the Israeli military, the U.S. military. His sons did. He's an American before that's my type of guy. But and he recognizes what's right and wrong and calls it like it is. But the people who don't, who shot other people down, who label them anti-Semites and all the other crap, ruin careers and refuse to get tenure to professors or get professors fired. Overwhelmingly, the Jewish community knows about this, and they remain silent. Mm-hmm. And they are completely. That's why those people, in my opinion, are a fifth column. I sent you some stuff a while back, and I dug this up. I believe it was, I can't even remember who it was, a couple of months back, where they said there were more American-born Jews serving in the Israeli armed forces than in the American army.
Yes.
And it was a Jewish publication. Also, there were more British-born Jews serving in the Israeli army than in the British army. And then you have Sheldon Adelson saying how, I had the American uniform on, but I'm sorry that I did. I really wanted to be in the Israeli, military. And by the way, my wife was, he says, and my kid wants to be a sniper, just like those guys in Gaza wants to be a sniper. And
that's pretty cold.
I don't look upon these guys as
That's
Americans
pretty
at all.
cold.
And he bankrolls the entire. He bankrolled the whole policy thing on Iran. He bankrolled the whole policy thing on Jerusalem. He owns Trump.
Yes.
So that's the fifth column. And the people who don't actively come out and say, yes, that's what's going on. That's the fifth column. That's unjust. That's immoral and wrong. Shooting down 1,300 people in one day, that's wrong. And they don't, if they don't come out and say that, then frankly, they're part of the problem. They need to get out. They need to go where their bread is buttered, and it ain't here.
I look at the media's silence on what's happening in Gaza, and I'm reminded of this incident that happened back during the second war in Iraq, where this U.S. soldier was caught on video throwing a puppy off a cliff, and it was like headline news. How horrible, how horrible. And yet when Israel's snipers kill all these Gazans, no big deal here. Maybe the Palestinians should have their dogs out there with them. So when the dogs get shot by the IDF, then the corporate media will take note, I guess, I hope.
Well, you remember over the past, some of the things that have been huge things here. Back in Iraq, when they were clearing one of the Iraqi cities or whatever, and a couple of American infantrymen were going from room to room, and they caught somebody. They went through a room, and the guy put a bullet in one of the people, one of the enemy, who was already down, because he didn't want somebody to his rear that he didn't know was dead. And that
I remember that. I remember seeing the video.
Remember also one in Afghanistan where they had there was an attack on an American fire base or something, and one of the American soldiers, as awful as it sounds, peed on the bodies, pissed on the bodies of the dead guys that had just tried to kill him, and they peed on him.
Yep.
And that was vilified as well. The Israelis do that every day and twice as bad.
Yes.
Every day. Nobody says a word.
I mean, the Israelis routinely urinate on the Christian monuments in the Holy Land. That never gets any coverage.
Yeah, they put sewage into their farmland. They spit on them. There's a group of Israelis who go around Jerusalem and Bethlehem and so on, and they will spit on non-Jews.
Yes.
It's ridiculous, but nobody says it. Just like, remember that video we had of that drunken settler saying, "We killed Jesus and blah blah blah. We're proud of it, and we'll get off our land. This is our land."
The drunk settler video that's still out there. It is. It's unfortunately a cultural personality problem. It's institutionalized. They're literally raised from birth to think this way. And one of the reasons that you don't have more than a handful of people who are speaking out about it is it's actually part of the Jewish faith that you're not allowed to publicly criticize a fellow Jew. You just zip your lip and you stay quiet, and nobody's criticized publicly. And again, this is the way they're raised from birth. And, I got to see a little bit of it close up during my first marriage. And I was a little shocked. I honestly thought she was kidding with me. I thought she was pulling my leg, but she was absolutely serious about this stuff. Anyway, Peter, anything else?
Well, I just want to say my very best friend is a Jewish guy, Marine, Vietnam, great guy, really good sense of justice and all this.
Yep.
And for instance, when I sent you the stuff about with like Adelson and all this about how the party is, both parties are on, Saban, Adelson, Soros, and about also the information about there are more American Jews in the Israeli army
Yes.
than there are in ours. And mind you, this guy's a Vietnam vet and a Marine Corps combat vet. And I also sent the clip of Sheldon Adelson saying how, they had raised, in a room full of people in Beverly Hills where they had raised, like $55 million in one night, Friends of the IDF.
Yes.
And all these Hollywood luminaries, millionaires were there, and they $55 million in one night. These are guys who bend over backwards not to pay taxes. None of their kids are in the military.
Yep.
You can guarantee that. And yet there they are. And I sent this to him, and he goes, and he's in denial too. Now, this is the very best of people that I know, and no matter what faith. And he's in denial about it. I go, Larry, you're in freaking denial here. Are you kidding me? This is the fifth column. But he said, well, look at, like, it's the Christian Zionists. He tried to blame it. I go, where are they without the real Zionists? And then he goes, well, what about, Robert De Niro was there, and, he's a dual citizen of Italy. I go, are you actually comparing the Italians and the way they, the Israelis with what they're doing in our political system with the Italians and freaking Robert De Niro? This is a guy who is a great guy. And I'm telling you, the culture is denial, and it's sick. If you can't self-correct, it's sick.
Yeah.
So, anyways, that's it for me, Mike. But thanks for. I'll be calling back a little more regularly now since we finally we moved to the Valley.
Okay. All right. And thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates rejoining the network. And then we're going to talk to Scott in California. Aloha, Scott. Thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. I'm on the West Coast, and I used to work on the waterfront in Oakland. And there's something I've noticed over the decades, and it's the West Coast longshoremen.
Mm-hmm.
So in the early 80s or the mid-80s, remember the Solidarity movement in Gdansk or Danzig, if you're a German sort? Well, when the commies cracked down on that, on the Solidarity movement, the West Coast longshoremen boycotted all Soviet bloc ships. And about, I'm going to say, 5 or 6 years later, the Soviet Union ceased to exist. And, you don't need to connect the dots, but it just happened. And then at one point in the it was in the 90s somewhere, they boycotted South African ships.
Yes.
Because of they were getting really nasty with apartheid, and it wasn't too long. There was no South Africa as we knew it. Well, I was down on the waterfront. It's been about, I'm going to say 5 years ago now, and I see this picket line, and the whole waterfront shut down. This whole terminal is shut down. And the West Coast longshoremen boycotted an Israeli ship over something that happened in Gaza. I think it was when they were shooting white phosphorus on civilians.
Yes.
You know, an out-and-out war crime several years ago.
Yep.
And so the longshoremen boycotted a Zim ship. The pilots refused to bring them in, and the tugboats refused to dock them. So it doesn't happen overnight, but I've noticed this over the years. Whoever the West Coast longshoremen refuse to work their vessels, and somewhere between 5 or 8 years later, the whole thing does not even exist anymore. So there's a little bright spot for our little friends in Tel Aviv.
Well, it's a possibility. You know, I think that earlier caller was correct. People around the world are opening their eyes and realizing just how badly they've been had, not only by Israel, but by their own governments relative to Israel. And I can understand Peter's anger because I feel that as well. You know, the United States of America, the U.S. government, is supposed to be under our control. That's the way the country was set up. And Israel has subverted our government. We're under foreign puppet rule.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks that way. You know, something else. You think about all those dual Israeli citizens in our government or in influential positions like Chertoff.
Yes.
And you go, okay, what if they were Bulgarians? I mean, wouldn't people be going, hey, what are all these Bulgarians doing here? I mean, wouldn't they be asking the question at least?
I imagine that they would be, but the real question is why we allow dual nationals inside our government when most countries absolutely forbid that. They only allow, you know, full citizens of their countries, and in many cases, like our presidency, the requirement is you be born in this country before you hold office.
Right.
And whoever came up with this idea that it was okay to have all of these Israelis inside the U.S. government, to me, that was a betrayal of our country right there.
Well, of course, but then that just implies they're calling their shots. You know, it's the end of that conversation. Okay, Michael, talk to you later.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Roxanne in Texas. Aloha, Roxanne. Welcome to the show. What is on your mind?
Hi. Well, this past Wednesday, Nick Mulvaney, he's an Office of Management and Budget. He invited he was supposed to have a Consumer Advisory Board meeting.
Yes.
And he took out 25 directors. Did you hear that?
Yeah, we did. We reported it yesterday.
Yeah, but he said they can be volunteers to the board, right? And since Trump's been in office, 40,000 government workers are gone, and I don't think anybody noticed. Trump just cut $35 billion out of that omnibus bill, and he cut U.S. aid, which has to be done by the Secretary of State. That's who's over those types of programs, and that was where Clinton did her pay-to-play, because those are the weapons and the aids to countries, so that's gone. Well, there's some good things happening. It's just, you know, Pompeo didn't even get in till April, so that's why they're blocking, and that's why they're not taking their recess. Mitch McConnell.
Mitch McConnell said, you know, if you're not getting any work done, you don't get to go home and campaign in August. And obviously those members of Congress running for re-election this November are very upset about that.
Well, they want to go through also that bill, all that cuts that Trump just made. That's another real big reason. But the other one's the candy sugar coating, but they have to look at that bill of all those $35 billion he's cut. So it's a process, but it's little trickles here and there. You know, you get a couple more indictments going, and you got to go.
They're all low-level people. I mean, you know, Mueller just indicted Manafort yet again for something totally unrelated to Trump-Russia collusion. Okay, and I'm getting sick and tired of you know, getting these little cracker crumbs thrown at me to say, see, we're investigating, we're doing our job. No, I want the meat. I want the Clinton Foundation investigated. I want the Clintons investigated. I want to know if Hillary was using that email server as part of an espionage operation that may have involved Imran Awan. We're now finding out that Sessions is refusing to bring any charges against Imran Awan. So he's obviously being protected as well. There's something nasty going on there. We need to get at it. And Manafort's getting indicted is not going to be a distraction to me. I'm sorry.
Well, I think the thing is that Amron, because look at the judges. Trump's trying to put in 400 judges. These judges are Obama judges. How can you build? They won't do anything. But Awan is taking a plea, and he's going to turn in Schultz, Wasserman Schultz. So, I don't know.
No, no, it's a plea bargain. Hang on, Roxanne. Imran Awan is not turning state's evidence on anybody. It's a plea bargain where he is going to plead guilty to his bank fraud situation, and then they'll give him a wrist slap on that, and it's over. Okay?
Well, we'll see. I hear so much different from the cryptographers. But anyway, okay.
All right. Well, I hope you're right. I hope you're right, because I'm getting, I'm getting sick and tired of waiting for somebody in this government to actually do the job they're supposed to be doing. Roxanne, thank you very much. We're going to let you go. We're coming up here on another commercial break. Lockheed Martin has been awarded a $929 million contract, that's almost $1 billion with a B, to develop a hypersonic weapon to counter the hypersonic weapons already being made by Russia and China. They're playing catch up. And why Lockheed Martin, that built that F-35 piece of junk, got this contract begs explanation. Is it politics as usual? Was somebody greasing the skids? Was there a kickback? Because after the failure of the F-35, Lockheed Martin is absolutely the last company that should be handed this kind of money to develop a cutting-edge, high-technology weapon. So anyway, we're going to take another break here for commercials. When we come on back, a lot of domestic stuff going on. And again, Lady Claire in hour number 3. So we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to take 2 more phone calls, and then we're going to close the phone lines because I got a lot of news to get through before the top of the hour and the lovely Lady Claire. Let's start with Chris in Manhattan. Aloha, Chris. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
You know, I often hear you demand an investigation of Hillary Clinton, but I never hear you demand an investigation into Larry Silverstein, or maybe the Katyn massacre, or the Holocaust, or what is it about Hillary Clinton? She's not even a nub on the pole of criminals, Jewish criminals, that we need to deal with.
Well, first of all, Hillary's not Jewish.
I will.
Hillary is not Jewish.
Well, I don't care. Hillary is nothing compared to these criminals. Nothing.
I disagree.
So why you keep going up her tree?
I disagree.
Totally beyond me. Well, you disagree. I know you disagree. You've made that clear.
Okay.
You don't even demand an investigation of 911 anymore.
I've got dozens of pages devoted to 911. Anyway, thank you for the phone call. The reason I focus on Hillary Clinton, and the reason I disagree that she's a minor player, goes all the way back to Arkansas in the 1980s. And the gun and drug running operation, which eventually became known as the Iran-Contra scandal, where the CIA was manufacturing untraceable military weapons and shipping them down to Nicaragua to arm the Contras. And because this was an unofficial, unapproved operation, they were funding it all with tons of cocaine being brought back into the country on those same smuggling aircraft. And that cocaine was brought into the country, it was sold to our kids, and this was all done under the eye of then Governor Bill Clinton, who basically provided security, made sure that the state drug enforcement stayed away from certain airports and certain drop zones, and set up a money laundering operation involving land flips, banks, and a state agency, the Arkansas Development Finance Authority. And if you start with the amount of drugs that were brought on in, and then you look at how much the corruption that began there in Arkansas in the 1980s has spread and overtaken our entire government, you come to understand the Clintons are major, major players in terms of crime. And yes, I'm focused on them because I want an investigation. All right, last phone call, then we're going to close the lines. Chuck in Texas, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, my friend. We've had this conversation before, and we'll have it again until perhaps at some point the tripping point will reach where you realize there are not two sides to our government. This kabuki dance of collusion, which is, as you say, not a crime, okay, and all these, and no prosecutions that ever amount to anything, is all just kabuki dance to keep us thinking that that Trump is our friend. He's opposing the Clintons. He's opposing all this.
I'm not seeing that.
Happened.
I'm not seeing that. Trump has been a tremendous disappointment ever since he got into that White House. And I don't know why Mueller and Rosenstein are still trying to get Trump out, because he's given the deep state pretty much everything that they wanted. And very obviously the corruption is in fact bipartisan. And the...
Let me make my point here, Mike.
Okay.
My point is that this president is the most dangerous president we've ever had, because people are foolish to believe that he is not in the back rooms working absolutely with them. You're not going to get prosecuted. Don't worry about it. This is all just, as long as the enemy of my enemy is my friend, your base will continue to support you while he sells us out 100%.
Well, I think the American people, I think Trump's base have come to realize that they got duped, or either that or Trump has somehow been compromised and controlled. When he took office, they may be blackmailing him, or they may have threatened his life. Trump has turned out to be a very weak leader. He's easy to manipulate by his own cabinet. He's susceptible to flattery. He tends to go with his gut instead of thinking things all the way through. We're actually seeing the consequences of that up at the G6. Trump's going to be a one-term president, and it doesn't matter if he's impeached or not. He's not going to win re-election in 2020, and that's unfortunately just what's going to happen.
He never intended to run a second time. He was here to sell us out.
Well, he's got a 20 campaign website. He's got an organization, so he's going through the motions here. But in terms of selling the American people out, it's hardly confined to just the president. Everybody in the government is selling everybody out that they can.
Absolutely, and that's my point. But to anyone who would defend Donald Trump, to me today, I would just point out everything that he has actually done. Everyone he has appointed, his war cabinet, his bowing to Israel, absolutely. He has
I'm not
sold
defending
us
Trump.
out
I refuse to defend him anymore. He's a disappointment. Anyway, listen, Chuck, we got to let you go.
Thank you.
We're going to take a commercial break here. We're going to close the phone line so that I can do some news before the lovely Lady Claire joins us. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And getting on back to the news here. The phone lines are closed for the moment here, especially when I get harassing calls like that are out there just trying to push their own agenda. Apparently, a top Senate staffer has been arrested in a leak probe. This is James A. Wolf, and he's been arrested and indicted on charges of giving false statements to FBI agents in 2017 about repeated contacts with 3 reporters. Now, this guy is the former director of security for the Senate Intelligence Committee. And this story is starting to really sizzle because apparently one of the reporters that he was leaking information to was the New York Slime's Ali Watkins, who apparently has admitted she had a 3-year romantic relationship with James A. Wolf. And the story is now starting to get a little more legs because now it's come on out James Wolf was leaking to 4 major outlets: CNN, New York Times, NBC, and ABC. Now, is he the leak? I don't think so. But he was obviously a major leak. And leaking in and of itself is not a crime, but they've arrested and indicted him for lying to the FBI when they were trying to find out who was the leak here. Apparently, it's turned out that Wolf was accused of domestic violence in 2003 and 2004. Normally, that would be enough to strip you of a security clearance. But for some reason, James Wolf was able to hang on to his. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the show, Robert Mueller has filed new criminal charges against President Donald Trump's former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, as well as Russian citizen and former Manafort operative, Konstantin Klimnik. But none of this has anything to do with the Trump campaign. Mueller is out there fishing again. He's just out there fishing, trying to find something that justifies all the money that's been spent. Now, Bill Clinton is still out there making his book tour. He's co-authored a book with James Patterson. And it's causing a bit of a problem because he no longer has the imprimatur of being the president. And so people who are showing up at these book signing parties, they're asking questions. He got grilled on Monica Lewinsky, wasn't happy about that. Apparently, on one of his recent parties, Bill Clinton is now saying that it was all the fault of Green Party candidate Jill Stein that Hillary Clinton lost in 2016. They keep changing who they're blaming here. But Clinton basically said Stein was the preferred alternative of the Russians. So he's still out there pushing Russian collusion, only he's switched away from Trump to Stein. And people weren't buying into it because Bill Clinton got asked about those 26 trips he took on the Lolita Express. And if you're not sure what I'm talking about, that was the nickname of Jeffrey Epstein's private plane that he would fly down to his little pleasure crib down in the Caribbean. And it was called the Lolita Express because, as you know, Epstein was convicted of sexual activities involving underage girls. And the story is that there were a lot of underage girls down on his little private island. And a lot of very rich, famous, powerful men, including a member of the royal family, were outed for having gone down there for a little illicit fun, as it were here. Okay, now, as you know, the Inspector General report onto the handling of the FBI, rather the Clinton email case, is going to be released in just 5 days. And already we're hearing that tremendous amounts of pressure are being brought to bear on Michael Horowitz to water it down, because we can't damage the image of the Department of Justice and the FBI. They're all worried about their image. They don't care about the fact that they're breaking crimes and doing bad things. They've just got to protect their image. And that goes all the way back to the very beginning. When J. Edgar Hoover was head of the FBI, his #1 rule was never embarrass the agency. And he was obsessed with the FBI's image. Not necessarily how it behaved, but definitely the image here. So the IG report is coming on out. What little has been leaked basically amounts to James Comey did bad, which we already knew. So I'm not expecting any bombshell revelations. In fact, it looks like it's a slow-walking whitewash again. Meanwhile, interesting story that came out of Front Page magazine, reporting on how Robert Mueller, unable to really find any connections to Russia, has started looking at connections with Israelis. And so this article is asking, is the Russia conspiracy theory about to morph into an Israeli conspiracy? Because of some of the contacts between the Trump campaign and Israel agents. But collusion is collusion is collusion, which again is actually not a crime. Meanwhile, over at Samantha Power, we need to keep focused on the fact there are so many things to keep track of. in Spygate, this web of corruption that is unraveling before our eyes, is just this Gordian knot. And we do need to keep paying attention to certain specific items. Now, as you will recall, Samantha Power was caught using her security clearance as UN ambassador to review private conversations by United States citizens. And according to official records, she requested the unmasking of those private citizens over 260 times in 2016, for which she was brought before the House Intelligence Committee to explain her actions. And there was an aborted attempt to say, oh, somebody was using her name and security clearance to do the unmasking. That story is no longer operational, as they like to say in Washington, D.C. But again, that's another aspect of it. A lot of spying going on. Hillary's email server, Imran Awan, Samantha Power unmasking the identities of law-abiding American citizens. Speaking of Imran Awan, apparently he, on top of everything else, is a bigamist. He's married, or was married, to 2 Virginia women at the same time. And one of them apparently called the police and complained that Imran was keeping her like a slave. 15 days later, gunmen shot into her family home. So that's a lot of juice over there. Boy, I used to think one day I'd like to visit Washington, D.C. I'd like to visit the National Archives and see the Declaration. I'd like to see the Air and Space Museum. But boy, it's a rough town here. Representative Louis Gohmert is slamming the Department of Justice handling of Imran Awan's cyber breach. And came on out there and just said, we need someone assigned to the Awan case that will protect Congress from further breaches and from the Awan crime family. For heaven's sake, we need someone in the FBI to step up and do their job. Which is true. All of this stuff is happening because nobody is doing the job they're supposed to be doing, whether it's FBI, Department of Justice, Minerals Management Service, Securities Exchange Commission, FDA, USDA. They're all just sitting there parked on idle and letting corruption just run rampant across the land. As I mentioned earlier in the show, Attorney General Jeff Sessions is refusing to bring charges against the Awan brothers. So they're being protected, which reinforces my idea that the spying they were doing on congressional computers was tangled up with what Hillary Clinton was doing with her private email server and the Clinton Foundation. Selling U.S. secrets. Remember, the Clintons did it back in 1996. It's called Chinagate. Okay. Donald Trump seems to be caught up with celebrity worship these days. He had that meeting with Kim Kardashian, and apparently he's getting ready to pardon Kim Kardashian's drug connection. But now, following that whole kerfuffle with the NFL, basically Trump is now approaching NFL players to recommend pardon candidates to basically demonstrate exactly what it is they're protesting when they kneel. I don't know how well that's going to work. Supposedly, the NFL players are protesting the escalating police violence against blacks, which, as it turns out, doesn't really exist. It's just more propaganda fanned up to play the race card going into the November elections. So, I don't know if that's going to play out very well here. Getting on back to Samantha Bee. As you know, she came out calling Ivanka Trump a feckless blank, rhymes with runt. And this was on her TBS show Full Frontal. And as a result of this, I mean, everybody said, if Roseanne Barr lost her show for that tweet about Planet of the Apes, why does Samantha Bee still have her program? Well, she may not have it for long, because 2/3 of her advertisers have quit the show now. And it was a tacky thing to say. It was very irresponsible. Of course, I don't like Samantha Bee anyway. This is good news for all you potheads out there. Trump has basically confirmed an intent to sign the states' rights cannabis bill that was introduced in Congress yesterday. In other words, they're going to end the federal ban on marijuana, and I imagine Jeff Sessions is going to be screaming and crying about that one. I imagine he's heavily indebted to the alcohol and tobacco industries. But it's going to be left up to the individual states. And those states that are allowing recreational marijuana, they're making a lot of money off of it. And it really is better for you than tobacco or alcohol. And for example, alcohol will kill your brain cells, but hopefully only the weak ones will die. Marijuana actually stimulates the growth of new brain cells. And I remember on the game Jeopardy, when Anderson Cooper did a celebrity match against Cheech Marin. Yeah, Tommy Chong. It was against Tommy Chong. And Tommy Chong just wiped the floor with Anderson Cooper. Cooper didn't know any of the answers, and Tommy just had them right there. So don't let that goofy facade fool you. He's a very, very brilliant man. And the recreational pharmaceuticals may have contributed to that. I know in Hollywood, a lot of very creative people insisted that the more marijuana they smoked, the more creative, the more bright they got. So I'm not going to name names, though, here. A little bit of good news here for those of us who are opposed to George Soros messing about with our country. As you know, we had primaries this last week, and the blue wave did not do all that well. In fact, even the corporate media is admitting the blue wave appears to be collapsing. People are just sick to death of the snowflake liberals, and they're voting conservatives. George Soros backed candidates for district attorney in Sacramento, San Diego, and Alameda counties to basically get a more progressive liberal justice system. And they all lost. And so this handed the Open Society billionaire embarrassing defeats here. So we're starting to see the backlash against liberalism, both here in the United States and in Europe. Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin has delivered his annual direct line session with the country's citizens today, and basically saying that there are ample forces in the European Union capable of ending the anti-Russian sanctions. All it takes is the political will and the courage to do it. That the United States' influence over Europe is already strained by all the tariffs and sanctions. And it's time to start straining at the leash. Now, over at Sputnik News, they have a story talking about that Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which is basically opposed by the United States. And most analysts think it's all about the U.S. trying to grab the gas trade for itself. But according to John Helevig, geopolitical analyst, he's saying the real goal is the United States wants to sever Europe and Russia economically, just cut them off completely, which would guarantee that Europe would be forced to do business with the United States rather than have the option of going to Russia and presumably China as well. That's what it's about, creating a marketing monopoly. You will do business with us. You will buy our GMO agriculture. You will buy our manufactured goods. Now, as you know, Trump is up there in Canada at the G7 and basically fired off a bunch of confrontational tweets. Trump is not going to get a good reception up there because of the tariff program and sanctions. Emmanuel Macron is already out there saying he's going to stand up to Trump. He's not going to back down on these issues here. And Trump, of course, is already firing back at this idea of the G6 confronting the United States. Interestingly enough, though, Donald Trump is saying that Russia should be allowed to come back into the G7 or make it the G8 again. And that's surprised a lot of people, I think. Surprised a lot of people. But yeah, that would be a good way to tone down some of the hostilities, is bring them back in. Peace through commerce. I'm sure that Trump's advisors will say, no, you don't want to do that. Too many people want that war. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. This story just now coming on in. Apparently, the IDF has started spraying the Gazan side of the border area with herbicides. And Israel is claiming that this is to improve security along the border in the light of the recent clashes. The Palestinians are saying what's actually going on is that some 420 acres of farmland have been effectively ruined, including spinach, pea, parsley, and bean crops. So, not very good. All right. Getting on back to the economic news here. Over at The Atlantic, they're running an article asking, has the Western world started shunning America? And that was an issue I raised, I think, about a week and a half ago, that the abandonment of diplomacy and negotiation and this chest-thumping approach to foreign policy was going to alienate a lot of our traditional allies. And according to The Atlantic, yeah, that does seem to be happening. Now, part of the problem is the United States doesn't have anything to negotiate with other than do what we say or we will bomb you, which apparently does seem to be part of the foreign policy posture here. Let's see. American officials are now touring the globe trying to pressure countries to cut off all trade with Iran. They're running into resistance, to put it mildly, basically saying to the Americans, you're not welcome here. We're not obligated to follow your laws. So America's empire is in decline. All right, let's talk about the economic news, or at least a little bit of it, until the Lady Claire joins us. Apparently, 8 Israelis have been arrested in the Philippines for running a multi-million-dollar online scam that involved Bitcoin currencies, a cryptocurrency, and supposed online investments. And the Israelis were arrested in raids carried out by local police at 3 offices in the city of Angeles. So you understand my concerns about cryptocurrencies, that like anything else, they can be used for good or for bad, but they can be manipulated and turned into a Ponzi scheme. Trump's Justice Department has now affirmed that Obamacare is in fact unconstitutional. And this came from Attorney General Jeff Sessions, saying that the Justice Department will no longer defend the constitutionality of Obamacare. And Sessions says that the individual mandate has become unconstitutional. So that is also falling apart. At least Jeff Sessions finally did one thing right. Financial guru Peter Schiff is out there saying it may look like the United States is prosperous. It's an illusion. It's a phony prosperity. He's absolutely right. It's all being held together with spit and baling wire. We're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be back with the lovely Lady Claire after these few. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And for those of you watching on YouTube, the gorgeous creature sitting next to me is the lovely Lady Claire, who, as usual, on Fridays is going to share hour number 3 with us. So what's the first thing you want to talk about?
Well, the first thing that I read from RT Russia Today, and one of the things I encourage all of our readers and listeners to do, is to read the foreign press in English, because you may get a clue of what some foreign powers are doing and what the United States is doing to enable them. Apparently, it was reported that Israel has just ended a drill for full-scale war on Gaza. Let me say that again. Full-scale war on Gaza. Apparently, Israeli air and ground forces have finished a week-long exercise to prepare for a full-scale war on the besieged Gaza Strip. The maneuvers, which were carried out in preparation for war in the north and the south, ended yesterday, enlisting hundreds of warplanes and gunships, and this came straight out of the Jerusalem Post. The drills, the Daily wrote, included actual airstrikes of large numbers of targets across the coastal territory. And there was a quote from one of the commanders. "My squadron today returned from a mission in Gaza. We have successfully met all these challenges, and we are ready for any threat." And this was attributed to the commander of the 105th Squadron as saying.
Okay, well, there's one problem with that.
Yep.
And that is, of course, that the vast majority of people in Gaza are civilian non-combatants.
Oh, I know.
And, I mean, if Israel thinks they have a public relations problem now between the Bloody Monday massacre and the shooting of that Palestinian nurse, if they just go on in and scrape out Gaza, it will be seen as a horrendous war crime. And that means that Israel's going to have to do something either to distract the world from what is going on, or they're going to have to wait for something going on that will provide some kind of news cover for them, or they're going to have some kind of ridiculous false flag like Hamas has got a nuclear weapon or some such nonsense.
Oh, I've got an idea about that.
Okay.
Apparently, Israeli aircraft, meanwhile, dropped leaflets in Gaza which warned Palestinians of an imminent war, saying they had to refuse to protest near the fence separating the enclave from the occupied territories. Now, Mike, Netanyahu is going to be looking for a time to do this when both Russian and U.S. leadership is otherwise occupied. He may well feel that next week will be perfect timing, as President Trump will be meeting with North Korea's Kim Jong-un on Tuesday, 12 June in Singapore, and President Putin will be on hand for the opening ceremonies of the FIFA World Cup, which starts Thursday, June 14th in Moscow and runs until July 15th, with the World Cup champion team acclaimed at that time. And there's a lot of security that Putin and his people have to take care of. There are a lot of opportunities for mischief making by highly emotional fans.
You absolutely have got that one correct. Getting on back to Israel, what it looks like Netanyahu is trying to do. Okay, hang on. You got to keep the cursor over on this side.
All right. I'm sorry.
There you are.
There we go.
There you are. Okay. Netanyahu maybe just trying to commit an act of terror, or implied terror, to get the Gazans to stop protesting at the fence.
Not going to work.
Netanyahu is still out there trying to insist to the world that Hamas is making these people go up to the fence, and I seriously doubt that. But again, this is looking really bad for Israel. If he were to actually go ahead and haul off on this major attack on Gaza, especially after word got out that this was all about trying to silence the Palestinian people and keep them from protesting for their right to return. It's going to look even worse. Netanyahu's got himself painted into a heck of a corner on this one.
He does, but my thought is this, Mike. If he's going to do this, it's got to be done quickly, because first, you cannot keep a military at the highest state of alert without wasting them with what's called readiness fatigue. And secondly, he is afraid that if he waits and isn't somehow blocked by the press looking at other things, if he goes ahead with such a war against Gaza, once Gaza's burned to the ground, he thinks that the outcry will stop and business as usual will return for Israel. But on that last one, he's dead wrong.
You know, when Israel was first founded and they drove 750,000 Palestinians out of their homes, the conventional wisdom of the Israeli government was the old will die and the young will forget. Well, obviously, looking at those young people marching along the fence, no, it's not working, and it wouldn't. It won't work in this particular case either.
I don't think so, and I've got a companion piece on this. Apparently, Israel sealed a Palestinian family's home with them inside. Now, this is how that went. A Palestinian family was trapped inside their home and forced to leave through a broken window after Israeli occupation forces welded their front door shut in the southern occupied West Bank district of Hebron this morning. The incident took place on Al-Shuhada Street in the old city of Hebron, one of the most militarized streets in the occupied West Bank.
Okay, we're going to do a quick shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. We had a caller on the air a little while ago talking about it isn't just the fact that Israel is oppressing the Palestinians and occupying their land and keeping them in this giant open-air prison. It's the expressions of sheer brutality that are shocking the world. And this is another example. What is the point of welding the front door of a home to force the family to leave the house through a broken window?
Oh, I will tell you in a moment.
Oh, please do.
Samar Yussi Zahida told Ma'an that Israeli occupation forces broke into his brother's house at 8 a.m. and forced him and 3 members of the family into one room. After detaining the family for a brief period of time, occupation forces broke one of the windows in the house and exited through it, allegedly telling the family that if they want to leave the house, they must also leave through the window. Israeli forces then sealed the front door shut. What they're trying to do is get Palestinians to leave their homes to make way for the settlers.
Yes.
This is their, this is their MO. But then again, what can one expect from a Russian apartheid self-proclaimed theocracy with nuclear weapons? I mean, that's just where it is.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, so...
and another story about Israel, which I thought was interesting. Israel taunts Iran with a Mean Girls gif after Supreme Leader calls country a malignant, cancerous tumor.
I would agree with that one.
Or did he? Israel trolled Iran's Supreme Leader with a Mean Girls gif after he threatened to eradicate the country. The Israeli ambassador in the U.S. poked fun at Ayatollah Ali Khamenei in response to a series of bombastic tweets in which he described the fellow Middle Eastern nation as a malignant, cancerous tumor. The Supreme Leader tweeted that Israel has to be removed and eradicated. It is possible, and it will happen. Now,
okay, I'm questioning that already.
I smell a rat.
We know how easy it is for Twitter to be hacked.
Yeah.
We know that we were lied to about Ahmadinejad saying we're going to wipe Israel off the map.
Never
That's
said
not
it.
what he said.
No.
And we know that they're ratcheting up for an imminent war in Iran because Iran dumped the dollar and went to the euro a week ago.
Yes.
And that is the unforgivable sin in the eyes of the American government. So I would say that this feels more like propaganda. What I understood Khamenei to have actually said was to remind the world that Israel and their nuclear weapons are the threat to world peace.
Well, I'd like to move forward with an article that I linked to from RT, Russia Today.
Okay.
Now, we understand that the Israeli propaganda machine is at full tilt boogie mode right now, and becoming U.S., Israeli, Saudi war, and Russian maybe against Iran. And I questioned if Ayatollah Ali Khamenei actually said that and said what he was accused of saying.
Yep.
And in fact, I was wrong. Courtesy of Sputnik News, I can now tell you exactly what Khamenei said. The president of Iran reportedly declared that the Israeli government won't be able to feel safe while it continues to maintain its hold on Jerusalem. And as people in Iran and several other countries took part in the Quds Day rallies, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani declared that Israel leadership can no longer feel safe, according to Press TV. The occupying and aggressive Israeli regime can never feel that it is in a safe place, Rouhani said. Delegates wait.
That's a photo caption.
Yeah, okay. And Iran has called Israel's nuclear capabilities a global threat and urges the IAEA to put Tel Aviv on notice. He also spoke against U.S. unilateralism, declaring that he intends to discuss this matter during the upcoming summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and branded the United States' withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal as illegal. He mentioned... He mentioned that the United States is quitting unilaterally without any particular reason, and it's a real insult to the nation of the world and a violation of United States Security Council Resolution 2231. Rouhani added, the whole world has to feel that the approach that the U.S. is adopting is a dangerous approach in international relations, which undermines international treaties, and countries should not remain silent on this international move.
No, they shouldn't. I mean,
whoa, hello, yeah.
You know, and again, we had an article we were talking about a little bit before where the West is starting to actually pull away from the United States, and I think a big part of that is this repeated demonstration that nobody can take the word of the U.S. government about anything any longer.
No.
That we've violated so many treaties, we've broken so many agreements and commitments, again, the U.S. government is acting more like an organized crime gang than an actual civil body.
Yeah. Rouhani's statements came shortly after Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu warned that Israel is willing to engage and destroy Syrian forces if the latter decide to attack. Now, Mike, what do you think is going on with Russia and Israel right now?
Well, I'm not sure, and as I mentioned earlier in the show, I don't know the reason that Putin changed his mind regarding arming Syria with the S-400 missile.
Right.
But apparently he had a meeting with Netanyahu, and Netanyahu said something that convinced him to change his mind. Maybe Netanyahu said, you know how we've hidden a nuclear bomb in New York City? We got one here too. So you're not going to sell the S-400 to Syria. But certainly from the way that Putin snubbed Netanyahu during the May Day parade, it's obvious that it was not a pleasant meeting.
Another article about Iran, which I thought was very silly in the way the wording was stated. Iran makes hard turn east as fate of nuclear deal dims on Friday. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani heads to China for an economic and security summit in the city of Qingdao. And Tehran is, again, they quote it as making a hard turn east to boost its economy and counter mounting pressure from Western powers.
And that right there is the issue.
Yeah.
This foreign policy approach of sanctions and tariffs and bullying is actually leading to the isolation of the United States.
Yeah.
Our traditional allies are starting to pull at the leash.
Oh, yeah.
And all we're doing is we're taking these areas whose wealth the U.S. government covets, and we're driving them into the Russian and Chinese sphere of influence.
Well, that's exactly what's happening here. He is looking to deepen his relationship with China for trade and defense, because that is precisely into whose arms the U.S. and Israeli governments have pushed him and his country. You know, you don't have to be a rocket scientist, Mike, to see this coming.
Well, you know, it's kind of an interesting little bit of history regarding Cuba, because following the Cuban Revolution, Castro actually approached the United States about normalizing diplomatic relations. And the U.S. came on down and said, we're ready to go back to being friends as long as you're ready to go back to giving our corporations the favorable deals that we had under Batista. And Castro couldn't do that because under Batista, Cuba's agricultural produce was being sold to companies like United Fruit and PepsiCo at way below fair market value, which made these companies very rich and impoverished the Cuban people.
Right.
And Castro wasn't going to do that. So the U.S. declared, oh, we're going to embargo you, we're going to starve you to death, you know, we'll bring you down and put Batista back in, which is why Castro was forced to turn to the Soviet Union. And that, of course, in turn led to the Bay of Pigs fiasco, which led to the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yes.
And if there was one thing that Obama had done that I agreed with, it was to start to normalize relations with Cuba. And I'm not just saying that because I like Cuban rum and Cuban cigars, but because knowing that we're heading toward a new global war, the last thing you want to have is a Russian base of operations 90 miles from Florida. And I really thought that Obama was being smart, trying to bring Cuba into friendly relations with the United States in order to deny Russia
that opportunity.
Yeah. And then Trump comes on in, and they're bashing on Cuba again. History's going to repeat. And maybe it doesn't repeat, but it's certainly going to rhyme.
Yeah, I think so. I think so, definitely in this case. One story that struck me a little odd this morning. Well, they all are a little odd, but this one particularly. Apparently, NATO aircraft have started policing Montenegro's airspace. And they started doing this a year after the small Adriatic state became a member of the Western Military Alliance, despite strong opposition from Russia.
Well, the reason for that is very simple. When the Soviet Union collapsed and everything was going through a reset, NATO promised the new Russian republics they weren't going to expand to the east.
Which they are doing.
Which they immediately started doing.
Yeah.
And that's why Russia is concerned, because once again, you cannot trust the word of these people. So Russia's opposition is basically saying, you said you weren't going to do this, that you weren't going to bring NATO right up to our borders.
Yeah. And of course, that's exactly what's happening in NATO. And I think one thing that's useful is to occasionally look at maps, because sometimes the maps tell the story.
Yes, they do.
Because the Adriatic Sea, which borders Montenegro, feeds into the Mediterranean Sea, Montenegro is very well positioned to give NATO quick access to the Mediterranean or Eastern Europe if they were staging some kind of military offensive there. And looking at how desperately lousy both NATO's and the U.S.'s relationship have been with Moscow, I have to wonder if this is the reason that Montenegro has suddenly been receiving so much NATO attention.
Well, we're seeing a lot of forward basing of assets all over Europe and all around the Mediterranean. More warships are being put on in there, more ground equipment into Belarus and areas like that. So, yeah, they're basically putting all the pieces in place to get ready for a war. And I imagine Montenegro, because of where it's located, makes a very good naval staging area.
Right. Saw this also, and I was kind of amused. I have kind of a hug and a punch with the work of Senator Rand Paul.
Yes.
I know that he does a lot of great charity. He is an eye doctor, surgeon, and he does a lot of charitable work around the world where the need is great. When he starts backing the FBI about and defending them about Spygate, that's where I get a little bit antsy.
Yeah,
that just was odd. And Paul Ryan as well. Apparently, Senator Rand Paul has called for former CIA Director John Brennan to testify about whether he received secret information on Trump's campaign from European or British sources. Now, Paul wants him to testify before Congress under oath. Big question for John Brennan, who has become such a vocal spokesperson. Did you receive any secret info on candidate Trump or his campaign from European or British intelligence groups? Brennan should be brought before Congress and made to testify under oath now, Senator Paul tweeted on Thursday.
Well, I think that idea of under oath is overrated, certainly because we see so many of our politicians ignore their oaths of office and the oath to tell the truth. It's a holdover from an age where a person's value was their honor. That their word was who they are. But that age is now gone, and we're living in an age of accepted mendacity. But rarely somebody will actually get arrested for lying under oath, because it is a crime. But not a heck of a lot. Anyway, we got to take a break for commercials.
Alrighty.
And we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And before I turn the mic back on over to the Lady Claire, we're watching the Fox News feed showing that the protests along the border between Gaza and Israel are continuing. People are still being shot. They're trying to make a big deal over the fact that the Gaza protesters are trying to use incendiary kites to fight back. How dare they do that? But if you look at what Israel does to the Palestinian farms, we were just talking about they're using herbicides. They've used white phosphorus on residential areas. The settlers routinely dump their raw sewage onto Palestinian farmlands. So again, who initiated this? Those people in Gaza, they are desperate. Anyway, what's your next story here?
Next story is DOJ to release report on Clinton email probe on June 14th with hearing to follow. Okay?
Oh, that's going to be worth recording.
That's going to be interesting, but let me tell you what I think is going to happen here. I think that the person who's going to wind up getting thrown under the proverbial bus is going to be James Comey.
I agree.
Not Clinton.
Well, this has nothing to do with Clinton. This whole IG report and hearing is about how the Department of Justice and FBI handled the investigation into Hillary Clinton's email server.
Right.
Nobody is going back there and arresting Hillary Clinton, even though James Comey admitted she committed felony violations of Title 18.
Right.
And I'd like an explanation about why she's not being prosecuted for that.
Yeah.
Because Title 18 does not require intent, as James Comey tried to imply.
Yeah. Well, it looks like justice in this country has morphed into just us.
Yes.
As the elites rarely eat their own.
No, the elites protect each other.
Yeah.
You know what this all reminds me of?
What?
Do you remember when you were back in high school and there was always the clique, the socias, the beautiful people, the rich kids, the rich and beautiful kids, and they always hung out together.
Yeah.
And they always got away with everything because they were always covering for each other.
Yeah.
And it was just so angering and frustrating to see that. This is the same thing in Washington, D.C., only with nuclear weapons added.
I agree. Oh, and speaking of the U.S. government, the DOJ has reneged its commitment to provide Trump-Russia documents to Congress. Apparently, they just took it back yesterday, issued a press release after midnight, saying that they will only meet with a few select lawmakers on the same day North Korea's summit opens in Singapore. And there are new stipulations about how many and who can actually look at this. Mike?
Can you say cover up?
Yeah, they are covering their old, their own backsides.
It's very obvious. These are all supposed to be public records, okay? And we're not dealing with military secrets, so none of this is actually classified.
No.
Or it shouldn't be classified.
Yeah, I agree. And yet, it has been.
Yes.
You have to wonder what these people think of themselves. I don't think they think of themselves as public servants.
No, they don't.
In any way, shape, or form. They figure out, I wrote an article about it, I think what you've got in Washington, D.C. these days is what I would call a gotcha syndrome. Getting power, hanging on to it like you just won the lottery, and making sure that the opposition is not in a position to get it or wrest it away from you.
Yes.
It
is. Everybody's there, to line their pockets or just get their name in the history books, get statues and postage stamps made of their faces. And it really is a horrible situation. And maybe it's always been this way. It's just in the age of the internet and the independent media, we're seeing the government for what it really is.
It's in your face. You can't not see it.
That's true. It's almost like, they are putting it out in your face and saying, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
We're going to be corrupt. We're going to screw the people. We're going to take all the money. We're going to give it to Israel and Wall Street and the war machine. We're going to bomb a bunch of people, and there's nothing that you can do about it.
Well, you know how you talk about the small money replacing the really big money?
Well, the small money banding together to deal with the big money, yes.
I think that's what we're going to have to do.
Well, that's a nice little segue into a reminder that Republic Broadcasting and WhatReallyHappened.com do need your financial support because none of this stuff is cheap. We especially in this climate here in Hawaii, everything just falls apart. Claire was complaining about her headphones.
Yes.
And we only got those for you, 5 months ago?
Something like that.
Something like that.
But humidity is not the friend of anything plastic or anything brass. The pegs on my Celtic harp have rusted.
I replaced all of those,
I know.
2 years ago?
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's amazing.
It is.
How fast this goes.
Anyway, let's go. Actually, we're coming up here on another commercial break.
Okay.
And we'll come on back and we'll deal with this story here.
Okay.
But again, on Fox News, seeing this footage from Gaza, these people are clearly not armed. They are not rushing the fence. They are simply waving flags and banners because they were promised a right of return, which Israel refuses. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we turn the mic back over to Lady Claire, a couple of stories that we're seeing here in the corporate media about how the U.S. is now going to ramp up their fighting in Afghanistan. And we've been in Afghanistan, well, since the very beginning. It's
17 years.
17 years.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And except for the Korean War, which is still technically underway, this is now the longest war in United States history. And they're not able to make a lot of progress. They're in there just trying to look like they're not losing. And, of course, they're there for the opium and the oil.
Yeah.
The oil pipeline right of way.
Yeah.
The other story that we saw in the corporate media is that Putin is meeting with Xi Jinping and basically announcing that cooperation between Russia and China has never been higher than it is right now. This is a message being sent to the United States. You can't take us both on at the same time.
No.
All right. So what is your next story here?
Well, I'd like to continue a little bit with the story that you just did about Russia and China and their relationship.
Yeah.
They are moving very quickly to dump the dollar in bilateral trade as they can.
Yes.
Which is going to mean that going to be very few countries using the dollar henceforward, it's looking like.
Well, that's the whole point, the de-dollarization.
Yeah.
Now, the U.S. is still arm twisting, as many of their allies as possible to use the U.S. dollar, use it as a reserve currency. But it is definitely in decline. And a big reason for all of this war all over the planet is the United States wants to drag the world back to the 1950s and the heyday of Bretton Woods, where everybody on Earth used the U.S. dollar as a global currency, off of which the United States made a tidy profit. Now, back then, accounts were still being settled, either with boxes of printed notes or actual bullion. But in this day and age of instantaneous financial transaction and acknowledgement around the globe, the idea of a single recognized global currency is obsolete anyway.
Yep.
But that's the agenda that the U.S. is pushing. We're going to go ahead and take a phone call now here from Jerry in Chicago. Aloha, Jerry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael and Claire. Thank you for taking my call. Claire, I think this is the first time I've ever called into your show, and you were on a Friday. But you guys were talking earlier about credibility and a man's handshake and a man's word.
Or a lady's word.
Bottom line.
Yes.
Yes. Or a lady's word. Yes, you are correct. I mean, we had a thing, my God, like 40 years ago, 50 years ago. You were a real person, and you stood up for what you meant, your work, your ethic, all of that.
Right.
Was important. And this is all blown away by the wayside, and I'm sick of it because I got to be honest with you. I am a firm believer in you do a good job, you get a good day's pay. Plain and simple. And you keep your word. You're going to do this. You're going to do this on this day. You're going to have it done by this time frame, and you're going to have it done right. And I'm sorry to say, but America's lacking in that. And I see it in these kids today. I don't know. You guys see the same thing. I mean, we bark up the same tree all the time about the same problems. But that's all I wanted to mention. And as long as you know, and anybody listening, Jerry from Chicago, I give you a full day's labor for a day's pay. And if I don't think I gave you a full day's labor, I will cut it off of my pay at the end of the day. Plain and simple. I will charge you for what I think I worked.
Well, that's a very honorable way to do it. And, you know, when we were young, this idea of being a man or woman of your word was seen as essential to holding society together, that we had to be able to trust our friends and our neighbors and our relatives that when they said something was going to happen, it would be done.
Yeah.
But slowly over the decades, we have adopted this new culture where everybody just says what they need to say on the spur of the moment, and we have just come to accept this idea that what somebody is saying may or may not actually happen. It's no big deal because they're going to be saying something else tomorrow. And to me, that is a signal that our society is, in fact, starting to disintegrate.
You know what, Mike? In my day, we used to call that a car salesman.
Okay.
Okay? Yeah. Plain and simple. I'm going to sell you that car, and I'm going to give it to you for the best deal I can. That's a lie on top of a lie. But, hey, thank you very much for taking my call. You people have a fantastic weekend. Hope the volcano don't get you.
Yeah, well, again, outside of the VOG, we're on a different island. But interestingly enough, as long as we're on the subject, they're actually talking about dropping bombs on the lava to try and carve a channel so that they don't lose any more of these residential areas. Apparently something like 600 houses have been gone now, and they want to drop bombs on the lava, which is not a new idea because back in 38, I think it was, there was an eruption of Mauna Loa that threatened the city of Hilo. And then Lieutenant Colonel George S. Patton led a bombing mission to try and stop that. It's been argued back and forth if the bombing had any effect or not, but they're starting to get desperate down there. Anyway, Jerry, we're going to let you go, and we're going to switch over here to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Isn't bombing women and children enough, Mike? Now they got to bomb lava? What did lava do to anybody?
They ate 600 homes.
I thought they ran out of bombs. Weren't they running out of bombs?
They were, but I'm sure they still have a few of them left around here just in case.
But it's
Mike, you had a caller. Oh, sorry. No, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Oh, thanks. Mike, you had a woman caller said Trump's doing this, Trump's doing that. He's giving us breadcrumbs like Reaganomics.
Yes.
Yeah, like, you know what I mean? Like, he didn't do squat, and I voted for the guy, and I ain't going to vote for him again. And, you know, come on now. You know, they say you can even indict a ham sandwich. Well, that's the only thing going to be behind bars, Mike.
You're absolutely right here. And
you know what I mean?
You know, there are some very obvious shills calling into the show who are obviously upset that I am not the Trump supporter I was back in 2016. And they're out there trying to point to these little tiny nothing things that Trump has done as positives. But again, on the big issue, on the big campaign promise he made of getting us out of these foreign military engagements, he's obviously, failed on that. So we're seeing the PR machine crank up about, how good he is and how good he is for the economy and everything. In other words, he's playing the game the same way all of his predecessors did.
Well, and then another caller says you're not going after Larry Silverstein. Larry Silverstein wasn't in the government. I mean, Larry Silverstein's a scumbag, but Hillary Clinton's the link to all this, a lot of this stuff. Not all of it, but, she's the link. She's not small potatoes. That guy must have been a shill, too.
Yeah, I think so as well, especially because he kept pushing this idea, that we've got to go after the Jew criminals. And every time somebody calls into the show and starts talking about the Jews, I figure that's a shill, and I'll drop them at that point. But we did talk about Larry Silverstein. And, he's had his day in court. He got his money for the insurance policy. And we've talked about pretty much everybody this guy listed at some point or other. But yes, I will admit, my focus is on the Clintons, because all of this corruption that has just swamped our government today all tracks back to Arkansas in the 1980s and the CIA's gun and drug running operation. They're right at the heart of it. And we can't just nibble around the edges. It's like trying to kill the Hydra. You slice off a head, you get another head. You have to go to the heart and kill that. And that's what I'm trying to do here.
And Mike, your other half, your wife?
Yeah.
She's right. We always been at war with Eurasia.
I know. Amen to that.
Right?
Amen to that.
Right? And I watched Putin in China. They're like linked like your left arm and your right arm now.
Yes.
There's no taking that back. And it's Shanghai Co-op. That's it. Shanghai Co-op.
Mm-hmm.
That's the future, Mike. We've been saying that. The power has shifted.
It
you
is
can
shifting.
See, even Mike Mike Maloof on RT even says we're going from a unipolar world to a multipolar world. It's happening right before our eyes.
Yes.
And people should be recording this for the future.
Yeah.
They absolutely should be. And, of course, with Russia and China moving together, Russia will obviously now become involved in the One Road, One Belt project, and that is also something the United States does not want to have happen. We were talking earlier about how the U.S. opposition to the Nord Stream 2 is actually rooted in an agenda of dividing Russia away from Europe economically, just slice it right on off in order to force Europe to be dependent on U.S. companies and U.S. products and U.S. agriculture.
You know what's funny? If you think liquid natural gas is going to replace a pipeline, you got rocks in your brain. It's never going to.
Absolutely
and it's more
true.
expensive. So that's a joke. All right, guys, have a good weekend.
You too.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. And Claire, what is your next story?
Well, the next story is someone who has a very interesting moniker in D.C. Name is Andrew Kim. He is called by many the Grim Reaper. Originally from Korea, very hawkish on North Korea, and apparently he is going to be placed very close to Donald Trump so that if it looks like Donald Trump can actually get some sunlight going, that Kim is the agent of the deep state who's going to do whatever he can to try to stop it. And I'm looking at this article, Mike, and what I'm thinking is the translation here is that if at all possible, the American deep state doesn't want to see Donald Trump get any kind of traction with North Korea whatsoever.
That's very, very obvious. I mean, that's the reason why John Bolton has now been sidelined.
Yeah.
But apparently, it's a complex issue because Mike Pompeo apparently is now on the side of the president in not wanting to get a war going in North Korea because of what it would cost both in terms of money and in lives. And we're already stuck in so many wars right now, and we're running out of stockpiles like Dustin was joking us about. We've run out of the bombs to bomb the volcano. We don't have the manufacturing, the money, the manpower, or certainly not the moral right for any of these wars. Now we're finding out we've got some kind of a conflict going on down in Somalia. Apparently a U.S. soldier down there got killed today.
Oh, man.
So
it's grim.
It's
grim. Apparently, our military is seeking a new technology to weaponize information. Where have I heard that before? Tactical edge and all that. And you know something, Mike? I wish this country's leadership was as eager to educate our kids intelligently, repair its broken infrastructure, and repair the areas of its broken economy, other than for the 1%ers who are doing quite well, and as it is to wage endless wars which show no sign of letting up.
Well, basically, from their point of view, it's really very simple. We've allowed our manufacturing to decline. Nobody wants our GMO agriculture. Countries are turning away from using the U.S. dollar. And so from the point of view of the deep state, a new global war to remake the world the way the United States wants it to be, that's the only option. Because otherwise, collapse is now inevitable.
Yeah, it's really more a question of when rather than if.
Yeah, so basically they're going to risk setting the surface of Earth on fire because they can't think of anything better to do.
Yeah. I had an article come through that was very disturbing to me. And this has to do with the current U.S. policy of separating illegal immigrant kids from their parents when they come across. Apparently, U.S. Senator Jeff Merkley, Democrat from Oregon, attempted to enter a converted Walmart in Brownsville. And there had been reports about the kids being kept in cages, yada, yada. And he was streaming his social media on live to attempt to visit the facility, but he was denied entrance by Homeland Security. Why?
Well, obviously, because the conditions inside these facilities aren't very good. And this dovetails with a story we did earlier in the week where the Department of Homeland Security is saying they have run out of room for all these kids. And so I imagine that it is very much overcrowded, and Walmarts do not have the plumbing for a large permanent population. So I imagine there's been all kinds of sewage issues as well.
Yeah.
It's not set up to be a hotel. It's basically a big warehouse.
And what happens to these kids after their first 72 hours? I mean, do they get a chance to maybe be placed in adoptive families with loving, nurturing parents and families that could do some good for them? Or is this policy creating a state where these kids are institutionalized wards of the U.S. state with an astronomical cost for food, clothing, boarding, and education? What happens when they turn 18? Are they held in conditions as bad for the rest of their lives as are illegal immigrants to Australia? And trust me, you do not want to be an illegal immigrant in Australia.
Yes.
Because you are set to one facility and you will live in it, and it's horrific for the rest of your life. Even children.
Well, again, it's out of control. Mm-hmm. It's really out of control, and it's another indication. We're being fed an illusion that government is running smoothly, that the economy is recovering.
Nope.
But we're seeing more and more that with this example here, Department of Homeland Security, they don't have the resources they need to deal with all these children. And the smart thing to have done would be to not let them in here in the first place, or to basically meet them at the border and turn them back. But despite all of Trump's talk about a new wall and everything, the illegal immigrants are still being brought into the country.
Yeah.
And even though they may be in confinement, they're being allowed to stay here at a huge cost.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
No, it absolutely doesn't. And, I love kids. I love children.
Too. And I'm a frustrated daddy. Anyway, we got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with the last segment of our program today after these few words. And welcome back to our show. Boy, that's an old bumper from long, long, long ago, from Mubarak times here. Anyway, this is our last segment of our program today here. And
yes.
Anyway, what's your last story?
Well, the last story is an observation by a UN human rights worker for Yemen, Lise Grand, in a statement said that if the Saudis, enabled by the U.S., go ahead with the continued siege of the Yemeni port city of Hodeidah by the Saudi regime and its coalition partners, 250 people can expect to be killed.
They're not talking siege, they're talking a military assault. They're talking about an outright attack.
Right.
And it's certainly going to be horrific. My question is, earlier this week, there was a discussion where the Houthis were going to cede control of the port to the United Nations, which in theory would take it off the battlefield, and the United Nations in turn would make sure that needed humanitarian supplies were able to get in and out. But
apparently not.
Apparently it looks like the U.S. and the Saudis are just going to go on in and smash the place before the United Nations can act.
Yeah. I think that's what's going to happen here. And the number, and the U.S. doesn't count the number of dead in these, environments at all.
No, they don't care.
Yeah.
What was it? I think it was it Barbara Bush? Why should I
waste my beautiful mind?
Waste my beautiful mind other things. Or same thing with Madeleine Albright.
Yeah.
About all the people who had been starved to death.
Yeah.
Through the blockade of Iraq.
The Iraqi children.
Yeah.
And she said, I think it was worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah. These people are amazing. Just absolutely
No, they're
amazing.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
They're very, very scary. And, here's a challenge for the big pharmaceutical corporations. Okay. We know that sociopathy is an illness, a mental illness. Why are you not developing a pill for that? Okay?
I hear you.
Or money addiction. We need a pill for that.
Definitely we do.
Definitely need pills for that.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have anything else, or should I just pull out of...
Well, there was an article in Russia Insider about, is Putin really ditching Iran and siding with Netanyahu in Syria? And the short answer is no. And this particular writer and analyst said that the truth is that Putin has foiled the initial Israeli plan for Syria. But the plan B is propaganda on overdrive. And then there is some kind of conspiracy theory put forward. And then they're going to talk about the Iranian military nuclear program, Kennard.
Yes.
And step 2 is to declare that Israel is existentially threatened and let the dumb Americans fight the Iranians.
Well, you know, when Iran ditched the dollar and moved to the euro, they went right to the top of the to be invaded list.
Yeah.
And the question is going to be, what will Russia and China do? Because there's going to be at some point where Russia is not going to back up anymore.
No, it can't.
And that's where we're going to have bad things happen. Okay, there's the music. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller. He's or the John Stadmiller Show. I don't know who's got the microphone today. But have yourselves a really good weekend. Please take what you learned from Republic Broadcasting and whatreallyhappened.com. Share it with everybody that you know. Apparently, Rick Adams is going to be sitting in for John in the next 2 hours.
All right.
So, yeah, that'll be a good show. That's definitely worth listening to. Anyway, have a good weekend. We'll be back on Monday, and aloha, America.